Today's Friday Forum is made possible by Bank of the Cascades, CenturyLink, Family Care Health Plan, Miller Nash, The Standard, and Stoll Reese. Good afternoon, and welcome to City Club of Portland Friday Forum. City Club is where we bring civic-minded people together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and play. I am John HORVICK, City Club President, and I'd like to welcome members and guests alike, those of you who join us today at the Sentinel Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB Radio or watching on Portland Community Media. Today, Craig Wessel from the Portland Business Journal will moderate a discussion about the state of our regional economy. But first, some announcements. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners ensures we put on the best civic programs week after week. I'd like to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine. Our current Friday Forum sponsors are Chevron, Girding Evelyn, Morel Inc., Northwest Natural, Portland Timbers, and Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt. We are grateful for your support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in a warm round of applause for all of them. City Club's annual membership drive is underway, and we want you to join. For 98 years, City Club has helped shape Portland and the state through research, advocacy, and public forums. We are here now, more committed than ever, to tackle the tough problems we face. Government cannot solve these issues alone, nor should it. That's where our members come in, and why we need your support. There's no better time than our annual membership drive to save money on membership and receive our thank you gifts like t-shirts, scout books, and tickets to the Oregon Symphony. City Club staff will be waiting in the back after the forum for you to sign up, so please do so today. For next week's forum, we will have Multnomah County candidates from District 1 and 2 on stage for the first of our debates this primary election. Join us to hear Multnomah County Commissioner District candidates Jules Bailey and Brian Wilson, and District 2 candidates Teresa Rayford and Loretta Smith. That evening, City Club's New Leaders Collective will also be hosting a Friday night forum at 6:30 at Kells in Southwest Portland. NLC and distinguished panelists, join NLC and distinguished panelists to discuss the who, what, where, and how of getting into politics. And I get asked this sometimes, so let me assure you, NLC events are open to everyone. So if you ever had an inkling about getting involved in politics or just want to know what the experience is like, come to the event no matter what your age. You can learn more about these and other club events, purchase tickets, and become a member on our website, pdxcityclub.org. Join City Club in live tweeting today's event. You can follow or mention us at pdxcityclub, and be sure to use the hashtag CityClub in your own tweets. And as always, we'll be having a Q&A session with our speakers at the end of today's program. Members, please come to the microphone to ask your question. And for all our audience participants, please locate the index cards on the center of your tables and write your questions on them during the forum. We'll collect them prior to the start of the Q&A. And now to our program. Today we will hear from a diverse group about the state of the regional economy. The program will include an overview of the economy, followed by a panel representing a cross-section of public and private sector leaders who are critical to leading economic development and job growth to the next level. The discussion will address the importance of a robust economy to sustain the quality of life that we enjoy in the region and innovate on a level that can be recognized nationally and around the globe. Sean Robbins is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Greater Portland, Inc., bringing over a decade of hands-on experience in economic development, commercial real estate, and urban and regional planning. In his role, he recognized that healthy economies can change lives, create opportunities, and build a legacy for future generations. Sean was recently nominated by Governor Kitzhaber as Director of Business Oregon. Shane Bemis is serving his second term as Mayor of Gresham. Mayor Bemis has brought a passion for economic development, business, and community safety to City Hall. He's also a restaurant owner in Gresham's historic downtown. Lou Ogden has served as Tualatin's mayor since 1994. Currently, he is also the Small Cities Consortium representative on the Greater Portland, Inc. Board of Directors. Mayor Ogden has been committed to economic development and been instrumental in Tualatin's growth over the last 2 decades, specifically with the Tualatin Commons and the development of Tualatin's manufacturing area. Mark Ganz is President and Chief Executive Officer at Cambia Health Solutions. He's been a change agent in the ever-evolving healthcare community, and this issue has become his personal and professional cause. Vanessa Sturgeon is President and Chief Executive Officer of TMT Development. She has spent the last 12 years developing and managing mixed-use high-rise assets, retail shopping centers, and industrial parks in Oregon and Washington. Today's moderator is Craig Wessel, publisher of the Portland Business Journal. He began his publishing career with the American Cities Business Journals and was involved in the launch of more than 15 regional business newspapers. And so without further ado, please help me welcome our panelists.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. So in about 5 minutes, I'm supposed to give you the state of the entire regional economy. I will attempt to do just that, but also tee up what I think is the more interesting part of today's conversation, the diversity of the panel we have of public and private sector leadership who's actually supercharging our economic development plan within the region. First, though, let me start by thanking the City Club Director Sam Adams, former Mayor Sam Adams, for the leadership, because I think it's an important kind of note. We hear lots of state of the city addresses, state of the county addresses, state of the state, state of the union, but I think this might be the first time in probably our collective histories that we've had a state of the regional economy discussion, which I think says a lot about this community's understanding that the global economy requires us to actually band together and not let the traditional silos of jurisdictional lines separate us from who we really compete with, which is everyone outside of our borders, not the folks inside this room. So congratulations to the leadership of the City Club for actually recognizing that we're at this moment. I would also, if I could just take a minute, remiss if I didn't congratulate Craig Wessel and the Portland Business Journal. Last week, you probably saw they celebrated their 30th year of competent, comprehensive business coverage in the Portland community. Thank you, Craig. So the theme that the newspaper picked up on last week actually is the perfect way to tee up today's conversation, which, in case you missed it, essentially the headline read that over 30 years, the Portland Business Journal has seen this region emerge on the cusp of becoming a world-class city. And the question remains is, what are we going to do about that? What needs to be done to move us from a great place to a world-class economic competitor? And I think it hits on something that we all, or many of us, feel at a gut level, which is that we are a region on the cusp. We have the raw ingredients of ingenuity, talent, innovation, quality of life to be a world-class powerhouse, but now how to operationalize that and turn that into results over the next 20, 25, and 50 years is important on so many levels to our quality of life and our ability to succeed and protect the assets that we've built here that we've come to love. So by the numbers, Greater Portland is doing pretty well. We've improved a lot, although not everyone feels this. We've regained all of the jobs lost during the Great Recession now officially, about 85,000 jobs plus or minus. Our rate of job growth in the Greater Portland region now outpaces the U.S. national average for job growth. From 2009 through 2013, we've reduced the unemployment rate from a little close to 11% to just under 7%. And in the first quarter of 2013, this is a really important statistic because I know we love to compare ourselves to Seattle and San Francisco. In 2013, in the first quarter, Oregon raised more venture capital for the first time than Washington since Microsoft rolled out Windows 95. Think about that. Our entrepreneurial community, comprised of a lot of people, and so you always make a list, you always leave out somebody, so you run a risk. But folks that stand out, Raghu Raghavan, Sam Blackman, Luke Knies, Jeff Gauss, Bill Lynch of Jive, who's now entrepreneur in residence at the Portland Development Commission. This group of people continue to put Portland on an increasingly large economic innovation map. And I think it's a big part of the reason why companies like the Salesforces, Airbnbs, Mozilla's, Squarespace have planted roots here in Greater Portland. This is an important part of our economic story. It's a new part of our economic story within the last 10 or 15 years, and it's something that we're going to have to hold on to going into the future. During the last few years, our export volume, right? The things that we make, the things that we serve and sell to somewhere else in the global economy has increased from $21 billion to $34 billion in a very short amount of time, anchored in part by folks at Nike, Intel, and now the North American headquarter consolidation of Daimler. And why should we care about this? Exports is a fun number to talk about, but it's often one of those numbers that flies over people's heads. They hear it, and then it goes out the other ear. Export jobs pay on average 17% higher than the typical average job in our community. So when we talk about family wage jobs, we talk about increasing the median income. International trade and export-related jobs are part of the puzzle in getting us there, and that's beginning to happen on a larger basis. But just before you think I or all of us have started to drink our own Kool-Aid a little too much, there are some important points that I think we need to consider. And this is why you'll hear me say that we're on the cusp of something. And we could go either way. So our per capita income is still lower than the national average. And for example, the average college graduate in the greater Portland area, and this is just one group, the average college graduate makes 10% less than the typical college graduate in the United States. Now that may not sound like a lot, and you may ask again, well, why does that matter? Well, if you think about it, if we were able to raise just that group's average income up to the national average by 10%, we could inject $2.7 billion into the Oregon economy and would free up about $110 million for public schools. So when we talk about education, transportation, parks, bikes, transit, those are really important quality of life measures, but they are all bought by a thriving economy. So until we get to the point where we're creating enough new demand for workers that pushes up rates on workers to get those median incomes up, we're going to always be looking to find revenue from a small pool. We have to be able to grow that pie so there's more for everything, including our schools. Like I said, I think we're at an inflection point too. So while the numbers have recovered, and we're doing very well when you read the headlines, there's also a risk of our community probably becoming a little complacent, believing that we've come out of the storm. But in fact, we're at that moment where there's a window where Greater Portland's brand around the world is very good, despite the disagreements we have internally, despite the different views and ways forward that we might have as a community, a family within Greater Portland. The world sees us through a very positive lens, and we have an opportunity over the next 25 to 50 years to capitalize on that, supercharge our economic growth in ways that are consistent with our values of sustainability and community and quality of life, but also reflecting that we need that successful, thriving economy in order to pay for the things that we've come to love about this place. So the good news coming out of that is that there are people in this region who are passionate and visionary leaders who are making that happen, who are helping us take us from good to great, several of whom are here on this panel. Mayor Bemis's Garage to Storefront program in the city of Gresham has helped revitalize struggling commercial areas by attracting 67 new and expanding businesses to core areas of his community. Cambia Health Solutions and Mark Ganz have invested or created in roughly 20 new companies in a healthcare innovation portfolio within the company, and is beginning to remake not just the company, but also the healthcare industry's approach to looking at health, life, insurance. To the Portland Development Commission's best-in-class work to fuel startups, attract more capital, and take our community's sustainable green city story to the rest of the world, something that becomes increasingly important as the world globalizes and people move into urban areas at an increasing rate. There's going to be huge demand for that product over the long run. The important point to point out in that little list is that those are all public and private partners. This is not just a government endeavor or responsibility to grow the economy. It's also incumbent on our business community to help be part of growing the economy. So moving from doing great things inside communities and companies to building a region-wide movement is where we're heading next. And that's what these folks are going to talk about over the next 30 minutes or so. In the next few months, you're going to see Greater Portland, Inc. and our community of partners undertake an ambitious initiative stitch together all of the region's roughly 100 organizations or plans acting in some way in economic to develop a single vision and cohesive action plan. Vision is no good without an action agenda to follow it, to grow the economy, to become vibrant, resilient, and yes, even world-class. From the same question that the Portland Business Journal asked last week to its readers about what does Portland have to do to become a world-class city, I understand that there are some who responded that they don't believe Portland should aspire to be anything other than what it already is. And to some extent, I understand that feeling. What we know to be true, though, is that the global economy marches on whether we want to go along for that ride or not. And I suspect that many of you, maybe not all, but many, like me, would prefer to shape our future than to be shaped by it. So the reality is the economy is moving very quickly. It's changing rapidly. It's very global. It's very competitive. And we are one of the lucky metropolitan areas in the United States whose window of opportunity is actually opening up wider than it has probably in many decades in our region's economic history. So we're going to be asking you, the City Club, and dozens of other organizations around the region to be part of Greater Portland 2020, where public and private sectors are coming together, transcending politics, leaving our swords at the door under Greater Portland, Inc. to build that bridge for that action plan. And I hope you'll join these folks and the roughly 2 or 3 dozen other GPI board members and steering group who are going to be working on that with groups like yourself over the next 6 to 9 months. So with that, I will turn it over to Craig to facilitate the panel. And my gut instinct tells me I went longer than 5, but I said everything I wanted to say. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. And first thing I want to do is, because I don't think it was mentioned, is to congratulate Sean on being named the head of Business Oregon, to run Business Oregon for the governor. It is a huge job and a really critical job, and I'm really excited that Sean's going to be taking over that position, and we're looking forward to seeing you things. And if you were wondering about the state of regional collaboration, I want to point out that 2 mayors from the region came up on their own accord and sat together and are sharing a microphone. So that's how far we've already come, right? So the first thing I'd like to do is to have each of you on the panel just talk a little bit briefly about your organization, maybe some of the critical challenges that you're facing right now relative to your economic future here in the region. Shane, maybe we can start with you.
Lou and I argued about who was going to fight over this microphone first, so I'm glad I got it, Lou. Well, our city is about 110,000 people. We've been a city for 109 years. Great community, 22 square miles, a mix of different economic development organizations and that help us to all pull on the same end of the rope in terms of economic development. We have Boeing as our largest employer, microchip technology, on semiconductor. So we've got a pretty diverse economy, a great small business economy that is emerging as as recent as coming out of this great recession. Some of the challenges facing us have been sort of as Portland has regentrified to some extent, we've had an increase in poverty, an increase with some crime issues, and so trying to get our taking a traditional, very independent community and having them deal with things like homelessness, things like crime, things like poverty, are things that our city's never really dealt with or had to deal with. So as we're kind of growing in terms of we're Oregon's 4th largest city, that's a surprise to many people, and with that comes a lot of those challenges. So trying to provide the right amount of resources, whether it's through economic development or change to Oregon's property tax system, et cetera, has been a challenge that we face at the city.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Ogden, how about you?
Well, Tualatin is a city of about 26,000 folks, of course, on the south edge of the metropolitan area. And I would describe our town in a number of characteristics. First of all, even though we celebrated our centennial last year, we're a relatively new community. And so we have some great advantages and assets associated with having the opportunity to have built sort of from green fields and from bare dirt. We're fairly well planned. We have a great balance between residential, commercial, and industrial in terms of our assessed value and our land use, where about half of our city is residential, the other half is commercial, industrial, retail. And speaking of retail, we have some of the region's crown jewels with Bridgeport Village and soon-to-be Cabela's. And so we have that hitting on all cylinders. Through the economic downturn, we've actually experienced real growth every year. That growth has come from our industrial sector predominantly. We'll talk probably more about that as we talk about the conversation of how we advance this region, but we're fortunate that we have a strong cluster in advanced manufacturing, a strong cluster in healthcare, and we have a population that is becoming more diverse. About a third of our population, households, about a third of our households have a median family income of over $75,000. I think 30% over in 6 figures. We also have, though, a growing poverty rate, and we have an increased diversity in culture, which is a great thing, but we do have challenges, obviously, in providing those services. One interesting dichotomy, and then I'll pass the mic, and that is that in one of our nicest neighborhoods, one section of town, about 4,000 people, the grade school there is over 50% free and reduced lunch. So that's an extreme dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots. And again, part of our challenge as a region, and it affects Tualatin as well, is closing that gap and building that middle class.
Great. Vanessa, I know one of your challenges is behind you because I see that big, beautiful structure rising out of that hole in downtown. But can you talk a little bit about your organization and some of the things that you're facing, please?
Yeah, sure. Probably the most significant long-term issue that all developers in Portland really have is that we've had stagnant rates for the last 20 years for the office community and for retail as well. We're just now seeing that we're starting to come out of that rate stagnation and finally having the first increases in rates since the 90s, which is great news. That said, there are only so many companies in this area that are able to pay the rates that we need to get to justify new construction. And it really is a very common problem in Portland. New construction costs what it costs, and the costs have gone up significantly over the last 3 or 4 years as steel prices have gone up. And so we need to be able to hit that rent threshold, and in order to do so, we're not only going to have to rely on companies that are local, that are growing, but we're going to have to attract some new businesses. And Mayor Ogden hit on another critical problem, which is that we're having an increasing dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots. So we have a lot of the minimum wage level workers, we have a lot of the higher end workers, but we really need to attract and accommodate some of those fantastic manufacturing jobs in this area. And that's for the region as a whole. We need to look for industrial lands and be able to attract the kind of tenants to come do manufacturing work, and find some great training programs as well for students, so we have a ready workforce. That, you know, not everybody is meant to go to college, and manufacturing jobs offer some fantastic benefits and great solid living wage salaries for people that hit that demographic. So it's one of the things that over the next 5 years we need to look for, not only converting brownfield, but creating new industrial land within this region.
That, you know, that's an issue we've heard so much about. We hold CEO roundtables at the Business Journal, and particularly from the manufacturing sector. The whole workforce training and the lack of available workforce is just a critical issue. We hear about it over and over. Mark, Cambia is doing some really innovative things around growing businesses, particularly in the healthcare sector. And maybe you could talk about not only the organization and some of the challenges you're facing, but also, you know, from the perspective of having all of those different businesses, what are some of the assets that you're bringing to bear on those companies from this region, in growing companies in this region?
So a little bit about Cambia. We are a nonprofit, taxable organization, kind of an unusual organization in that regard. We are 22 companies and about 5,000 employees. We do business in all 50 states. Our products and services touch, at this point, about 110 million people across the country. And a little known fact, because of our nonprofit structure, we're actually the second largest headquartered company in this state by revenue, about $8.2 billion. And that would place us about 320 on the Fortune 500 if we sought such a listing, but we don't. We're very happy with the progress that we've been making over the last 10 years, particularly in diversifying to meet the needs of a rapidly changing healthcare environment. It's really quite exciting. The challenges that it creates for us is, as we've launched startups in this changing environment, is talent. Getting the right talent that can help keep the fire burning in terms of the innovation that we seek to accomplish in healthcare. And so we care pretty passionately about education, and particularly the higher education institutions, both public and private in this region, that they stay vibrant, that they are able to produce the type of talent that we need, so that we can continue to grow and innovate.
Great. So on the issue of regional economic development, Greater Portland, Inc. is arguably our first sort of successful foray into sort of a truly regional public-private collaboration on this front. And I'd like to maybe ask you to talk a little bit about, you know, a lot of people worked very hard on getting it to this point, and it does feel like it has some legs underneath it now. I'd like for all of you to talk a little bit about how that structure is working, what makes it work, and how is it going to address some of these issues that all of you raised, whether it's workforce training, the types of companies, Vanessa, that you need here, and in particular, growing jobs for the region. And Mark, go ahead.
I'll take a start, because this has been an area of real passion for me. I remember, I want to say 12 years ago, we were looking to build a large service center, and we looked around the entire state as to where we were going to site it. And it was going to, it's a center that can hold 500 positions, and so it was not an insignificant thing in this state. And what I was struck by at the time was how certain parts of the state, certain regions, did a really good job of coming together, publics and privates, to really roll out the welcome mat for us and make their best pitch. And interestingly, the Greater Portland region really underperformed in that whole process. And we ended up citing that facility in Medford, and it's a great facility. We're just announced earlier this week that we're actually going to relocate a number of jobs there from Salem because we're going to consolidate into that facility because it's really our state-of-the-art facility for part of our operations. But there was a lesson there, and I thought, gosh, we're headquartered here, my family lives here, and I just believed we have the assets in this region, and we could do better. And I think that we launched what was then Greenlight Greater Portland, now Greater Portland Inc. We launched it as a private entity, but in my mind, I always believed that the better model for this region was if we could bring the public leaders and the private leaders together around a round table, check your swords at the door, and this is not a place to debate and advocate business versus publics. It was a place to figure out how we could marshal the resources, public and private in this region, to create a unified face to the rest of the country and to the world, and a unified face for the businesses that were already here to make sure we didn't lose them. Because, as you all know, we've lost some very good headquartered companies over time, and we needed to stem that drain. So I think it's working very well. I am really impressed with how the region has rallied, and that there's this sense of when we're competing for a business that wants to locate here, it feels more like a friendly competition amongst the various municipalities as where that might be cited. But because of Greater Portland Inc., there's a sense that if Hillsborough wins, we all win. If Vancouver wins, we all win. If Portland wins, we all win. And that is a big improvement and a big change.
Thanks. Vanessa, your business is so driven by that issue, by jobs, and not just jobs, but quality jobs. Are you able to see, do you feel like we're moving forward? Are there sort of markers that you look at that sort of indicate that we're in a positive direction, that things are improving on that front?
Well, we certainly feel it. It's the rental market is hotter than it's been in a long time in this region. And I have to say, we're sitting next to two mayors who have done a phenomenal job at understanding that our lifestyle and quality of life in this region it's unmatched. It's amazing. That said, it is not enough to attract companies that are going to grow in this region. So there is no way to create the kind of jobs that we need to create in this area without strong public-private partnerships. And we're very fortunate to have some good leadership from some of our regional mayors in that way.
Great. So I'd like to ask our mayors, what this effort has meant to you guys, how you have engaged in that effort, and maybe your perspective on what is the role of the public sector in economic development. What do you feel like you guys are the most effective role that you can play, and whether it's attracting businesses or just growing jobs? And Mayor Ogden, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I mean, first of all, we understand that the public sector doesn't create jobs. Our responsibility is to provide an environment and provide for the public policy that will fund the infrastructure so that the private sector can come in and do what it does. Part of what we have done, I think, in the past fairly well, going back even 20 years ago, was provide that infrastructure, provide the transportation, the land. I mean, we think about what we did 20 years ago as we tried to tap into the Japanese market. We were, Hillsborough and Gresham and Tualatin and other cities were making trips to Japan. We were out there participating in some of the national global trade shows, and we found success. One of them was obviously Intel. And they came here because of land. They came here because of water. They came here because of some predictability in those costs. Now, through time, those assets have, I think, somewhat become blunted just because we've overrun some of that capacity. And public policy, I think, has been somewhat complacent to that. And so to the point of what we as government can do is to provide that type of predictability, that type of consistency in policy, and the type of policies that, in fact, tell the world we're open for business. And I understand that that incentives and putting cash on the table isn't the primary attractor for business. But when you come down to everything else being equal, or when you come down to developing a reputation, one of the things that brought Intel here was the Strategic Investment Plan, the SIP. Without that, we would not have had that success. And then all of the ripple effect that associated off of that is so many more times paid back whatever might have been perceived loss in revenue. Back to the collaboration for just a moment. One of our strengths, quite frankly, is that even though this is the Portland area, and I don't know if we'll talk about the marketing, but I think we have tremendous opportunity because, as Alyssa will tell you, when she goes on some of these trips, people don't even know that Portland exists. And so it's really a matter of branding, and that branding, I think, can come from public policy that says we're open for business, we want business. It also comes from the notion that we've got 25 cities in the region, not one. And it isn't a Portland attraction, it's a Portland region. That's what I think GPI has brought, and they've allowed us to do that in a way that we've sort of done naturally, particularly in Washington County. The cities have worked together for 3 decades to build infrastructure, to cooperate on land use and that sort of thing, and now we're reaching across from east to west to do that.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Bemis.
I would agree with much of what Lou said. I think the collaboration is incredibly important. It's important from the public sector to the private sector, but it's also as important, as Mayor Ogden said, between the municipalities. And I think what we've really seen under the umbrella of the organization is the fact that a win for Gresham is a win for Tualatin is a win for Portland. And that has kind of taken that, while behind closed doors the mayors may argue vehemently for their own jurisdiction, and as well they should, we know that at the end of the day, a win for the region is a win for all of us, and so that's been an incredible piece that we've been able to offer. In terms of how I view, the municipal government helping job creation, it's pretty simple. It's stay out of the way. I think you have things in your community that you need to hold strong to, and you have values and codes that will effectuate that. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to help businesses and hold true to the things that your community wants to hold true to, but also to get out of their way and come alongside them and be a partner with them. And that really came home to us in our Garage to Storefront program. While it was more on a small business scale, we actually, in 3 years, there was 160 new businesses and 200,000 square feet of previous vacant retail. And all we said was, we're not going to charge you any system development charges, any park fees, and we're going to be there with you from the time you pull your first permit till the time you pull your open sign. So we activated parts of our community that were, had vacant storefronts. They're now active, they're vibrant, there's people that are earning wages there, and it's just been a great thing. And that's just a small scale, but it does duplicate into the larger, broader scale of advanced manufacturing or industrial, all of those. The premise of belly-to-belly economic development and really being a partner, I think we need to stay true to that because it works.
Thanks. One of the issues, and Mayor Ogden, you mentioned this a couple of times, one of the issues that constantly comes to the forefront when the topic of economic development comes up is available industrial land. And while the growth boundary, without a doubt, the foresight that went into that played a large role in creating what a phenomenal city we do have, but it also there's also a lot of constraints that come with that, and the battles around changing it are legendary. Has this effort with Greater Portland Inc. managed to bring the various sides closer together on a vision around how that evolves? Any of you that are familiar with that?
I think that would depend on who you ask, but from my view, I think it has. I mean, because it certainly gives us a shared understanding, again, on that regional outlook of what's important to Hillsborough can be important to Gresham. So I mean, I think that's incredibly important. But as we talk about the urban growth boundary, the thing that we're missing and the thing that we have to talk about is how do you provide the infrastructure for the lands that we already have. We have 2,200 acres in Gresham that sits on Highway 26, great access to Highway 84, and it's serviced by a garden hose and a dirt road. And we don't know how we're going to get the infrastructure there to provide what was at one time forecast to be 16,000 jobs. That's regionally significant, and we regionally have to figure out how to provide infrastructure in those areas.
Thanks. You know, Sean earlier mentioned our neighbors to the north and south, Seattle and the Bay Area, and our relative position in terms of certainly per capita income, but I also think in general this sort of economic energy that exists in those places. And you know, the most obvious pieces as you look at those regions that sort of pop out are headquarter companies and concentration of wealth and concentration in particular of capital. And is that something that, and Sean, please weigh in on this as well, is that something that we can address through these economic developments, through this collaborative approach to economic development? Are those things you can even target? Is that something we can even change if we want to? And I'll open that up to whoever would like to take that on first. So.
Golly, I hope so. I mean, I think that's, I'm sure that Seattle and the Bay Area have their own warts that they talk about at forums like this, but the fact of the matter is that they do have a much stronger base of headquartered companies, and that really does make a difference. It makes a difference in corporate philanthropy, in the development of arts and the kinds of things that parks and the like. But most importantly, it's creating jobs that support the kind of quality of life that they aspire to have. I think that also they were a little ahead of us in terms of focusing on regional economic development. And I think that's, I've certainly learned since we brought Sean here and have really pushed forward, what a difference that makes to companies who are thinking about locating in a certain area. So absolutely, I think we should aspire to be world-class in that regard because we have so many assets at our disposal. And I'd like more company in terms of headquartered companies because there's a lot that we could do in this community. There's a lot that we're already doing in spawning new jobs and new businesses, and I'd love to have more of it.
Well, what Sean said about our per capita income going up 10%, meaning $110 million in funding for schools, I think is a message that really the public should understand. There seems to be this fundamental thought in Portland that business is not as important as it really is for developing those things that our community loves. Our schools are woefully underfunded in this region, and I think that economic development is the only way really that we're going to be able to solve that issue. Our facilities are in very poor condition. Our access to technology in schools is not where it should be. And I would really like to see a continued long-term education campaign to our voting bloc about the connection between our businesses and those services that we care so much about.
Vanessa sort of jumped ahead on the questions, and I want to come back to that issue of the value of economic development to the region and to the population broadly. But to your question, what I heard you ask about, do we target and recruit headquarter companies? What is our potential for doing that? And I guess I would go back to 2 or 3 things. One, first of all, we have to concentrate on not losing the ones we had. I can think back to a sad day in my mind was when we lost Georgia Pacific. I mean, we had a headquarters move out of Portland. What's with that? Secondly, praise some good work that we've done recently, the legislature and the governor, with respect to Nike, so that we keep that stake driven deeper in the ground. But the other component, I think, is recognizing that we don't, in my judgment anyway, we probably don't need to go out and target headquarter companies. Microsoft isn't going to pick up sticks and move to Portland, probably. But rather target, as GPI is doing, and as we collaboratively are doing, target the clusters that create the kind of wages that we need to do the things you talked about, as well as closing the income gap and advanced manufacturing, metals, healthcare. Target those clusters. So our biggest employer is not headquarters, but their largest footprint in the world is in Hillsboro, Oregon. So it doesn't have to be the corporate headquarters. You read Intel. We have, in fact, I think there are a lot of companies that come to this region, and more would come if we did a more aggressive job of marketing, which Sean and company is doing, come here because we're not LA or San Francisco or Seattle. And those opportunities for their growth and expansion can occur. Our largest employer is headquartered in Santa Clara, but over the years they've moved more and more and more of their expansion to Tualatin. So I don't know that it has to be headquarters. It has to be focused on the clusters and use the clusters that we have to market our viability.
I think the personal income is a significant component, and it's one that everybody has touched on. I think one of our region's greatest assets can sometimes be our greatest weakness, and this isn't about Greater Portland, Inc., but we are very good at regionalism, and we like to pat ourselves on the back and say we're so good in transportation, we're good, we work so well together regionally, yet sometimes I think we forget to really hold the mirror up and look at some of the things that are going on. When you talk about the personal income in terms of employment, it's significant. The gap between Oregon and Washington was the largest it had been in 40 years in 2009. So we're the 23rd largest metro area, yet we're 136th in terms of income per capita. So that is significant, and those are questions that I know that the Greater Portland, Inc. is wrestling with and trying to bring both public and private together to figure out how we get at that. And you mentioned education, clearly, and as we talk about, I think you can trace a lot of this back to the way that we provide tax provisions in the state of Oregon. When you look at income and how volatile it is and how the taxes follow that, it makes it very hard for any sort of government to make any sort of stable investments or to plan for the future. And I think we are seeing other states that have made significant inroads in addressing that issue and made investments into education where we haven't. And so we're playing catch up. And if we would have had Greater Portland, Inc. or this sort of thing 25, 30 years ago and been forward thinking as we are now, I don't think we'd be sitting here talking about comparing ourselves in terms of income to Seattle or San Francisco. We track more closely with Cincinnati, St. Louis, those are the Sacramento, those are the cities that we are more closely aligned with in terms of personal income per capita, not Seattle, not San Francisco. We're not even close.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
The one thing I would just add to and underscore what the two mayors have talked about is, you know, the next Microsoft or Amazon or whatever could very well be here already. And we have to do a better job as a region to hold on to the companies that start here and make sure they don't move. And if we can keep them and they can grow, that's going to attract more investment capital, and then it's just a virtuous cycle. And when you think about the night challenge and the opportunity that presents when we achieve that goal, by gosh, I think we have to press our advantage around that.
You bet. So we're going to open it up to Q&A with the audience. If you have a written question on an index card, please hold it up high so that the City Club staff can collect it from you. And we're going to invite the members to take the microphone to ask their questions, which I see they already have. Asking questions at the Friday Forum microphone is a benefit of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. Also, I'll read at least one of the index cards. So with our first question.
My name is Sharon Joy. I'm a City Club member. And my focus is on you, Sean, because of course you have focused on my type of people. First, I want to mention to all of you, though, money does not make quality of life. It can be just as easily spent on war or something else that does the opposite. I personally believe that everything is three-sided, so I don't believe it's just public-private partnerships. It's also client. I'm one of those. I am the receiver of all of your work, and I would like to have an input. Business and residential, you kind of separate as if it doesn't belong together, but I believe it does. It makes friendly streets when people live upstairs from the business, and I particularly want it in my case. I need 24-hour care, and I have sought for years just to get accessible housing. I have to depend upon the government for that because that is not a law yet, so I can't get it on my own. And if I can't get out of my home, I cannot get a job and I cannot support myself. So I want it all in one building. I want myself and my kind to live upstairs. I want a doctor's office on the first floor so I don't have to go to the hospital, emergency room, or nursing home. And that is why I'm asking, why don't we just combine the services better than we do? It could help schools, everything. You can do the same thing with any situation.
Let him answer.
Sean,
I'll take it.
Sure.
You bring up an important, I don't know that I can answer your question fully with the time that we have, and I think it's a complex question, to be frank with you. What I would say is that I think you illustrate the point that we are trying to make, which is that all of these issues are interrelated. And you can't silo out and separate social equity issues, environmental issues, transportation issues, and economic issues. They are all interrelated into the health of the community. And so I think the public-private partnership piece to which you referred to is 3 years old in this region. And I think that over time, as we get our momentum underneath us and we learn as a region how to power the economy together instead of in these silos, we will have more momentum and more resources to address more of those larger issues that I think you appropriately point out. At the end of the day, the economy impacts human beings, people. And some of these programs, some of the work that we do in our communities is funded with taxpayer dollars. And the only way to really be able to service those programs in ways for mental health, for disabilities, for job training, for any of these other issues that we might historically have seen as separate, is to actually grow the base of good-paying jobs so that the local governments, state governments have the resources they need to invest in these programs. Because we simply can't cut the pie up into different sized pieces and expect to do more with it. We're going to have to grow that whole pie. So I don't know that I completely answered your question, but I do think it's a complex answer, and I think you point out correctly how complex it is.
Thanks, Sean. Next question.
Dave Porter, City Club member. This is a workforce skills question. Currently, Oregon has about 42,000 students in kindergarten. It has statewide, it has 2 Mandarin dual language immersion programs, one in Portland Public Schools, one in the Beaverton Public Schools. Together this year they had 76 kids in those 2 kindergarten programs, which is 0.2% of the kindergartners statewide. The question to you is whether that is an adequate statistic for Oregon's education, economic future.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it gets into an area of education that I'm not sure that that we could spend the next 4 hours on this one. But Vanessa, you want to tackle it real quickly?
Well, I have 2 kids that are in public school. They're 5 and 6, and they're both in Spanish immersion, and they're actually both fluent in Spanish. So I think that shows you how important I think it is. It's critical, and we definitely are missing a Mandarin program, that's for certain. But I do think that hiring superintendents in the district who place a focus on that should be a key issue over the next decade.
Thanks. Next question.
Elaine Cogan, City Club member. I am taken by the audience and also the makeup of the panel. You reinforce the often stated remark that Portland is the whitest city in the country. I don't think that that's something we're very proud of, especially when I look at the panel, and thank you very much for your erudite remarks. But I wonder, we have a growing minority population in this city and in this state. And how do we deal with it if we don't have these folks represented on your panel and in the City Club? Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer that question. I think it's, in fact, who's familiar with the American Leadership Forum of Oregon? Is anybody in this room? I just finished the last 2 years of my career in life doing the American Leadership Forum of Oregon, which has taught me to ask the question that you just asked, maybe a little differently, which is, who's not at the table? So when we have these conversations around social justice and equity and education and transportation and economics, again, you're hearing that this is all interrelated. It has to be a group of people that represents the faces of not just this economy, but the future economy. That is hard to find because not always are those people able to get to that table. So as a community, and especially for what we do, which is the economy, and there's all sorts of other issues, we have to be asking the question, who isn't at this table that needs to be at this table that's impacted by the decisions that we're making, or even critically, and this is key, is the data that we need to be collecting on groups of people who have often been left out of the economic conversation. I don't pretend to have the answer for you. I don't think this panel pretends to have the answer for you today, but I do think, if I could speak for everybody, I think we all acknowledge it's something that this region has to get better at, especially as it talks about the economy going forward.
I think we have time for one more question from the microphone.
Thank you. Justin Gottlieb, a City Club member. As far as the public record is concerned, I represent the merry men and women of Sherwood Forest, modern-day Robin Hood. Actually just returned from Oregon's Middle East. My question is in regards to the homeless. And I'm not speaking of the homeless who we see every day on the streets. I'm speaking of the population that is burdened by huge student loans, debt, bankruptcy, foreclosure, that is currently living at home with their aging parents. When I was living on the streets, we had a saying, homeless, not hopeless. And I want to know if this esteemed body of economists and leaders is willing to open Pandora's box, so to say.
Anyone on the panel?
First of all, I think, and I recognize in our community, we have a number of people who are living with family, multiple families living together, some people living out of their car. I didn't quite catch all of the context of your question, but with respect to those folks who are perhaps even new to that situation after the economic crash in 7 and 8 and 9 who have not recovered, we absolutely need to recognize where those folks are coming from. Many of those folks are difficult to locate. I mean, they're coming to school, and sometimes it's the teachers who can recognize the problems. So we don't necessarily have the detection ability. In a community like Tualatin, we don't have the abject homeless on the street necessarily, but we have an immeasurable amount of folks that have partnered up and living with family, et cetera. You know, I don't have, obviously, the magic wand to tell you how to solve that, but what I can go back to, what I believe very strongly is that the first aspect of quality of life, and I think a guy by the name of Maslow addressed this, is taking care of those basic needs which come from employment for those that are employable. And those that aren't employable through mental illness or other difficulties, yeah, we have to find those folks and we have to help provide for them. But even in providing for them, we have to have the revenue to do that. So I think the biggest travesty in this state, frankly, again, is 10 or 15 years old. The grayer the hair, the more skeletons you can pull out, was when we closed our mental health facilities across this state and put all those folks out on the street. Well, why is that? Because we didn't have the public finance to take care of those vulnerable folks. Why? Because we haven't grown the economy to the point where we raise the tide high enough to float the boats. That doesn't answer your question directly, but I do understand the concern.
Yeah, I would also say we do a lot of research at the Business Journal around corporate philanthropy and the impact that both in dollars and the employees engaging in a lot of these social issues that you're talking about is absolutely remarkable. And I wish we had a lot more time to spend on these topics, but we're out of time. And with that, I'll turn it back over to John HORVICK.
Indeed, we are out of time for further questions, and we'll have to stop the broadcast for today. Join us next week for a Multnomah candidate debate. And as we close for today, please join me in offering our sincere thanks to Sean Robbins, Mayor Shane Bemis, Mayor Lou Ogden, Mark Ganz, Vanessa Sturgeon, and Craig Wessel. We are adjourned.